Daniel Miller had always believed that silence was strength. He wasn't the kind of man who raised his voice or argued to prove a point. He worked long hours at the repair shop in Portland, came home to his wife, Claire, and believed that love didn't need grand gestures, just consistency. For 8 years, that quiet rhythm had been enough. Or so he thought. Their home wasn't fancy, but it was. There's a 2-story house on the edge of the city. It's with creaking stairs and a cozy attic filled with old furniture Daniel restored in his spare time. When they first moved in, Claire used to call it their forever home. They painted the walls together, planted roses in the small backyard, and built a life that looked steady from the outside. But slowly, without either of them noticing, something changed. It began in small, ordinary ways, the kind that never seem serious until they add up. Claire started coming home late from work, always with a new excuse. She said she was busy with projects, that her team needed her, that traffic was terrible. Daniel never doubted her. He trusted her more than anyone. But with each passing month, the distance grew. She laughed less, smiled less, and looked at him as if he were just part of the furniture. He tried to fix it. The way he fixed everything else. He made her breakfast in bed one Sunday. He left small notes on the fridge. He planned a weekend trip, but nothing reached her anymore. Her mind was somewhere else, or with someone else. The first time he noticed the signs, it was just a text notification lighting up her phone late at night. A man's name he didn't recognize. She said it was someone from work. He wanted to believe that, and he did for a while, because believing her was easier than imagining the truth. But truth has a way of finding cracks in even the strongest walls. It was a Friday night when everything changed. Daniel finished work early, a rare thing, and decided to surprise Claire with dinner. He picked up her favorite Thai food and drove home with a smile he hadn't worn in months. The rain was light, tapping against the windshield, and for a brief moment he felt hopeful. Maybe tonight they'd talk, maybe things could still be fixed. When he reached home, her car was already in the driveway. The house glowed softly from inside, lights dim, music playing. He thought it was strange because Claire wasn't the kind to listen to music alone. Still, he smiled, thinking maybe she had finally relaxed. But as soon as he stepped inside, something felt wrong. There was a pair of shoes near the door, not his. Expensive men's shoes. He froze. His heartbeat quickened, his throat tightening as he listened. From the living room came laughter. A man's low chuckle, then Claire's soft, familiar laugh. The one she hadn't used around him in months. Daniel's mind went blank. His hands shook slightly as he set down the food. He could walk in right now, he thought. He could ask questions. But his body refused to move. Instead, he turned, climbing the stairs quietly, each creak echoing in the silence of the house. He wasn't even sure why he went to the attic. Maybe because it was the only place left that still felt like his dot. The attic was dim and cluttered with memories. Old photographs, boxes of Claire's books, the first chair he had ever restored. He sat there in the dark, trying to steady his breathing. But through a small vent that opened toward the hallway, he could see the reflection in the mirror hanging near the living room, and there she was. Claire, sitting too close to a man Daniel had never seen before. She looked radiant in a way that broke him, her eyes bright, her laughter free. The man leaned in, whispering something, and she smiled the way she used to with Daniel years ago. Daniel didn't move. He didn't cry. He just watched. The music played softly, her favorite song, the same one they had danced to on their wedding night. The irony stung like a knife. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. He wanted to shout, to demand answers, but the words never came. Instead, he sat there, listening to their voices, every sound etching itself into his mind. Time blurred. The rain outside grew heavier. The wind rattled the windows, but inside that house, Daniel's world stood still. At some point, the laughter faded. The music stopped. He could hear footsteps, murmurs, and then silence. The front door opened, then closed. The man was gone. Daniel stayed in the attic long after that, staring at the floor, his mind empty. It wasn't rage he felt, not yet. It was disbelief, the numbness that follows when something you trusted with your whole heart quietly collapses. He had seen it with his own eyes, and still, some part of him wanted to deny it. Maybe he had misunderstood. Maybe there was an explanation. But deep down, he knew. Hours later, Claire came upstairs. Daniel heard her moving around the kitchen, then walking up to their bedroom. He didn't go down right away. He waited until the house was silent again. When he finally descended the attic stairs, it felt like walking through a dream or a nightmare that refused to end. The living room looked perfectly normal. The glasses on the table, the blanket on the couch, the faint scent of her perfume in the air. He touched the back of the chair where she had sat earlier and felt a strange ache in his chest. Not anger, not even sadness, just an unbearable emptiness. He went upstairs quietly. The bedroom light was off. Claire lay on her side, pretending to be asleep. Her breathing was steady, calm. He stood at the doorway for a long moment, watching her, wondering who she really was now. Then he lay down beside her, turning away, staring at the dark ceiling. He didn't sleep. His thoughts ran endlessly, replaying what he'd seen, what he hadn't said. His silence pressed down on him like a weight, but he couldn't break it. He didn't want to wake her. He didn't want to fight. He wanted to understand. When morning came, Claire acted as if nothing had happened. She smiled faintly, made coffee, and asked about his day. Daniel said nothing. He watched her move around the kitchen, every gesture familiar yet foreign. She was the same woman, but not the same person. That day, Daniel went to work like usual. He fixed a neighbor's car, changed oil, tightened bolts. From the outside, he looked calm, just another man doing his job. But inside, he was replaying every detail of the night before. He wondered if this had happened before. He wondered if she had brought other men into their home while he was working late, trusting her without question. When he returned home that evening, the house was quiet again. Claire greeted him with a tired smile, kissed him on the cheek, and went upstairs. Everything felt ordinary, painfully, cruelly ordinary. He sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the walls they had painted together years ago. The silence between them had never been louder. And in that silence, he made a choice not to confront her yet, not to shout or demand the truth, but to wait. Because sometimes silence reveals more than anger ever could. He would watch, listen, and learn how far the lies had gone. But as he sat there, hearing her hum softly upstairs, Daniel realized something even more painful, that the woman he loved was now a stranger. And the home they built together was no longer his refuge. It had become a place of ghosts, and he was one of them. The following week felt like a blur for Daniel. Every day he went to work, fixed cars, talked to customers, and came home to a house that felt colder than before. He and Claire spoke, but only about ordinary things, groceries, bills, the weather. Beneath the calm surface, his mind raced. The image of that stranger's shoes by the door, Claire's laughter, and the glow of the living room haunted him. He wasn't ready to confront her. Something deep inside told him to wait. He needed to understand the full truth, not just what he saw that night. He wanted to know why Dot, so Daniel started noticing everything: the way she smiled at her phone, how often she disappeared into the backyard to take private calls, the change in her perfume, the new clothes he hadn't seen before. She was careful, but not enough. The details began to form a picture he couldn't ignore. One night, while Claire was asleep, Daniel quietly went through the laundry basket. It wasn't something he was proud of, but love and suspicion make people do strange things. In the pocket of her jeans, he found a folded piece of paper, a receipt from a downtown restaurant dated 2 nights earlier. 2 meals, a bottle of wine, and her signature at the bottom. He had worked late that night. She had told him she was home. He sat there for a long time holding that receipt, feeling his hands tremble. Proof, not just a suspicion, evidence that her lies went beyond what he had seen. But even then, anger didn't come. What he felt was closer to sorrow, the quiet kind that sits in your chest and refuses to leave. Over the next few days, he noticed more signs. A different scent on her scarf. A new playlist she listened to while cooking. She was changing in small ways, almost like a different person. Daniel kept silent. Every time he thought about asking her, the words stuck in his throat. He didn't want to hear her lie to his face. Then one Friday evening, he came home early again. He parked his truck a few houses away and walked quietly toward his own front door. Through the living room window, he saw her setting out glasses, lighting candles, arranging things like she was preparing for someone special. He felt his chest tighten. He didn't want to believe it was happening again. But deep down, he knew. He went around the back, climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, and waited. His heart pounded as he heard the doorbell ring. Then footsteps. A man's voice, this time different from the one before. Claire laughed softly, welcoming him in. The same ritual, the same warmth she no longer showed him. Daniel sat in the dark, every sound from below echoing through the old wooden floor. He could hear their conversation about work, music, and travel. They talked like two people falling in love. She spoke with excitement, the kind of spark she hadn't shown him in years. He felt invisible, like a ghost watching a version of his life that no longer belonged to him. Hours passed. When the man finally left, Daniel climbed down from the attic and walked through the empty house. It smelled of perfume and wine. He noticed 2 glasses on the table and a half-eaten dinner. He looked at the flowers she had placed in the vase, white lilies, her favorite. It all looked so normal, but to him it felt unreal. That night, he didn't go to bed. He sat in the kitchen until morning, staring at the faint outline of sunlight creeping across the floor. When Claire came down, she smiled at him and said, "You're up early." Her tone was light, as if nothing in the world was wrong. He looked at her for a long moment. Part of him wanted to ask, who was he? But instead, he just nodded and said, "Yeah, couldn't sleep." The silence between them was heavy, like 2 people standing on opposite sides of a broken bridge. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel's quiet observation continued. He didn't want revenge. He didn't want drama. He wanted to understand the person Claire had become and maybe, in a strange way, understand himself too. One Saturday morning, Claire told him she was going to a work meeting. Her tone was casual, but her eyes flickered in a way he'd never seen before. When she left, Daniel decided to follow, not out of anger, but because he needed to know the truth once and for all. He followed her car through light weekend traffic. She didn't go downtown. Instead, she drove toward the outskirts of the city, near a small lake surrounded by pine trees. She parked in front of a quiet cafe, the kind of place they used to visit together. Daniel parked a distance away, watching as she got out of her car. A few minutes later, a man arrived. Not the one from before, someone new. Daniel felt a strange calm as he watched them walk into the cafe, sit together and talk like old friends. She looked happy, relaxed. He stayed there for nearly an hour, just watching. Then he drove home. That drive back was the hardest part. Every song on the radio felt like a memory of what they used to be. Every street they once walked together carried a weight he couldn't shake. By the time he reached home, he realized he didn't even feel jealous anymore, just tired. That evening, when Claire returned, she looked surprised to see him home early. "You didn't mention you'd be back so soon," she said. He nodded, forcing a small smile. "I thought I'd surprise you." She froze for a moment, then looked away. For the first time, Daniel saw guilt in her eyes, real heavy guilt. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The silence between them spoke louder than words ever could. Over the next few days, something in her changed. She grew quieter, distant, but uneasy. Maybe she could sense that he knew. Maybe she could feel the shift in his energy, the calm before something inevitable. Then, one evening, while she was in the shower, Daniel went to the attic again. He didn't know why. Maybe he needed to face the place where his heartbreak had started. He opened an old box of photographs, their wedding pictures, their first trip, her smile from years ago, and tucked beneath one of the frames, he found something he had never seen before, a small envelope with his name on it. Inside was a letter, written in Claire's handwriting. His hands shook as he read it. She wrote that she loved him, but she felt lost, that she had changed and didn't know how to tell him, that she had been trying to feel something she had lost long ago, not because she stopped loving him, but because she didn't know how to love herself anymore. She confessed that she had made mistakes, that she didn't deserve forgiveness. But she wanted him to know that he had always been good to her, even when she didn't deserve it. By the time he finished reading, Daniel's eyes were filled with tears he hadn't shed in years. The anger he thought he'd feel wasn't there. Instead, there was sadness, and somewhere beneath it, a quiet understanding. She wasn't the same woman he married. But maybe he wasn't the same man either. He put the letter back in the envelope and sat there in silence. The attic no longer felt heavy. It felt like closure. When Claire came upstairs that night, Daniel was calm. He looked at her and simply said, "I found your letter." She froze, her face pale. "Daniel, I?" He raised a hand gently. "You don't have to explain. I already know." For the first time in months, their eyes met and didn't look away. No yelling, no accusations. Just two people standing at the edge of something that was already over. He went downstairs, leaving her standing in the doorway, the same place where he once watched his world fall apart. When Daniel woke up the next morning, the house was quiet, too quiet. The sunlight slipped through the blinds, dust floating in the still air. He turned toward the empty side of the bed and instantly knew. Claire was gone. Her side was cold, the pillow slightly indented. But everything else looked untouched. At first he thought she might have gone for a walk. She often did that when she needed space. But when he went downstairs, the truth became clear. Her suitcase was missing from the closet. The coat she always wore was gone. On the kitchen counter, a single mug sat next to a folded note. He stood there for a long moment, staring at it. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. "Daniel, I know I've hurt you beyond words. I can't stay here pretending everything is fine. You deserve peace, and I need to find myself again. Please don't try to find me. I'll reach out when I'm ready, if I ever am. Claire." There were no tears on the paper, no emotion in her handwriting. It was short, final, and painfully calm. Daniel sat down at the table. It's the same one where they used to eat breakfast together every morning. He looked around the room, the framed photos, the plants she watered, the half-burned candle near the window. Everything felt frozen in time, as if she had just stepped out for a moment. But she wasn't coming back. He didn't cry right away. He didn't scream. He just sat there in silence, the kind of silence that feels louder than any noise. The truth had settled in. The woman he had loved for 15 years had walked away without a goodbye. That day passed slowly. He called in sick to work. He couldn't focus, couldn't eat. He walked around the house like a stranger, touching the walls, running his hand along the old banister, sitting in the living room where she once laughed with someone else. Every corner of that home felt haunted by memory. By nightfall, he went up to the attic again. It was the only place where he could think clearly, where the noise of heartbreak seemed softer. He sat near the window, looking down at the streetlights glowing in the rain. The letter she had written the night before lay beside him, next to the new one she left that morning. Together they told the story of a love that had quietly died long before he realized it, for the first time. He allowed himself to cry, not out of anger, but grief. He cried for the years they shared, for the woman he lost. For the version of himself who believed love was enough to keep someone forever. The next few weeks were the hardest. People at work noticed his silence but didn't ask questions. His friends invited him out, but he often declined. The house felt too big, too empty, and every creak in the floor reminded him of what used to be. One evening, as he sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, his neighbor, Mrs. Lawson, an older woman who'd lived across the street for decades, stopped by. She had always liked Claire and often chatted with her about gardening. "Daniel," she said softly, "I heard Claire moved out." "I'm sorry," Kay nodded, forcing a small smile. "Yeah, she needed space." Mrs. Lawson looked at him kindly. "You'll be all right, you know. People break, but they heal. You always struck me as someone who doesn't stay down for long." Her words stuck with him long after she left. People break, but they heal. That night, he decided to make small changes. He packed away most of their photographs, not to erase her, but to give himself room to breathe. He painted the living room, changed the curtains, moved the furniture. Every change felt like reclaiming a piece of himself. He started cooking again, not the frozen meals he'd been eating, but real food. He played music while he worked in the garage, fixing old cars on weekends, something that had always brought him peace. Slowly, life began to move forward. Then, one afternoon, as he was cleaning out the attic, he found an old photo album buried under boxes. It was from the first year of their marriage. The two of them smiling in front of their first apartment, holding hands at the beach, laughing with wind in their hair. He stared at the pictures for a long time. Instead of pain, he felt something softer, gratitude. Those moments had been real once, even if they didn't last. Weeks turned into months. The seasons changed. The ache in his chest dulled into something manageable. He no longer checked his phone for her messages. He stopped wondering where she was. He started thinking about his own future again. One morning, while having breakfast at a small cafe downtown, he noticed a woman sitting alone at the next table. She had a kind smile, reading a book, and sipping coffee. She caught his eye and smiled politely. He smiled back, a simple gesture that felt strange and new. They didn't speak. But it was enough to remind him that life hadn't ended. It had just shifted. That evening, Daniel went home feeling lighter. He looked around his quiet house and realized that for the first time in months, the silence didn't hurt. It felt peaceful then. 2 weeks later, he received a letter. The handwriting was familiar. Claire's. He hesitated before opening it. Daniel, I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for loving me when I couldn't love myself. I've been staying with my sister in Oregon, trying to understand where I went wrong. I've realized that running away didn't fix anything. It only showed me how much of myself I lost along the way. You were good to me, and I hope you find someone who gives you the peace I couldn't, Claire. He read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the same box as her first letters. He didn't feel angry anymore. In a strange way, the letter brought closure. She was alive, trying to find herself. Maybe that was enough. Life continued quietly after that. Daniel started taking long walks around the lake on weekends, something he hadn't done since before his marriage. He talked to strangers, helped neighbors fix their cars, and even joined a local photography club. He began to see beauty again, not in grand moments, but in small details: sunlight through leaves, laughter in a coffee shop. The quiet hum of life moving forward. One evening, months later, he climbed up to the attic one last time. The place that once held so much pain now felt peaceful. He looked out the small window, the same one where he had once watched his world fall apart, and smiled softly. He whispered to himself, "It's over." Then he took the box of letters, walked downstairs, and placed it in the storage closet. He didn't throw them away. He didn't need to. They were a part of his story, but not the end of it. That night, he sat on the porch watching the stars. The cool breeze brushed against his face, and for the first time, he felt free. Not because he had forgotten her, but because he had forgiven her and himself. A car passed by. The woman from the cafe drove past, waving as she recognized him. He waved back with a faint smile. Life had a strange way of circling back, offering new beginnings in unexpected moments. Daniel leaned back in his chair, breathing in the quiet night air. The pain that once consumed him was now just a distant echo, a reminder that even the deepest heartbreak could lead to peace if one chose to let go. He had watched love crumble from the shadows, had seen betrayal under his own roof, but in the end, he found something greater, clarity. And as the stars glimmered above, he whispered again, "Thank you, Claire, for the lesson, for the ending, and for the start of something new." The attic lights dimmed, the night grew calm, and Daniel finally closed his eyes. Not as the man who had been broken, but as someone who had learned how to live again. Claire had never planned to start over at 37, but life had its own ways of rewriting stories. Her divorce had been quiet, civil, and completely heartbreaking. After it ended, she packed up everything that felt heavy with memories and moved to a quiet neighborhood just outside Seattle, a peaceful street where people smiled at each other from across their lawns but rarely asked too many questions. That's exactly what she wanted: peace, privacy, had a chance to breathe again. Her new house was small but warm white walls, maple floors, and a porch that faced the street. Every morning, sunlight poured through her windows, touching the corners of her life that had once been dim. For the first time in months, she felt the world slow down. Across the street lived Daniel Brooks. He was the kind of man you noticed even when you didn't want to. Early 40s, tall, calm, and effortlessly kind. He lived with his wife Erin and their teenage son, who was away most of the year at a private school. Daniel was an engineer, the kind of man who fixed things quietly: fences, sprinklers, and sometimes hearts he didn't mean to touch. The first time they spoke was over something simple. Claire was struggling with her garden hose. It had cracked and was spraying water in every direction. She laughed at herself, drenched and annoyed, when Daniel walked over from his driveway. "Need a hand?" he asked, holding his coffee mug, smiling the kind of smile that reached his eyes. She hesitated, then nodded. "Please, before I flood my yard." He crouched down, checked the connection, and fixed it in seconds. "There, just needed a tighter seal," he said, standing up. Claire smiled. "You make it look too easy," he chuckled. "Comes with too many Saturday chores." 'Twas nothing, a brief encounter between neighbors. But that small moment stayed with her longer than it should have. That night, when she saw his porch light flicker on, she found herself looking out her window longer than she wanted to admit. Days turned into weeks, and their interactions grew naturally. Sometimes it was a wave in the morning, sometimes a short chat when they both picked up mail at the same time. He was always polite, never too familiar, yet something in his tone, his kindness, felt different. When his wife was out of town for work, Daniel often stayed busy with yard work or fixing things around the house. One afternoon, Claire brought him a glass of lemonade. "You look like you could use a break," she said. He smiled, taking it. "You just saved me." They sat on his porch steps and talked for nearly an hour about work, music, and how life sometimes takes turns you never expect. It felt effortless, like talking to someone who already knew her rhythm. From that day on, their friendship found quiet ways to grow. They exchanged small favors. He helped her with her mailbox when it jammed. She baked cookies for his son when he visited home. But beneath every word, something subtle pulsed, a warmth neither of them dared to name. One rainy evening, Claire was reading by her window when she noticed Daniel's lights go out. The whole street shimmered with rain, but his house was completely dark. A few minutes later, there was a knock on her door. Daniel stood there, soaked, umbrella dripping, smiling apologetically. "Power's out on my side." "You still have lights? Mind if I wait it out here?" She hesitated for just a moment before stepping aside. "Of course. Come in before you freeze." They sat in the living room, candles flickering. The sound of rain filled the quiet between them. It wasn't awkward, it was calm. Heavy in a way that made every small sound matter. "You ever notice," Daniel said softly, "how quiet everything gets when the lights go out?" Claire nodded. "Sometimes quiet is the loudest thing." He looked at her then, really looked. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. They talked for hours. About life, mistakes, regrets, love that fades but never fully dies. He told her about his marriage, how it wasn't broken, just empty. Erin was kind but distant, and he had stopped trying to reach her years ago. Claire listened, feeling the weight of every word. She understood too well what it meant to live beside someone and still feel alone. When the rain finally stopped, neither of them moved. He stood to leave, but his hand brushed hers as he reached for his jacket. It was a small touch, nothing more, but her heart raced. They both froze, then slowly stepped apart, as if afraid the moment might break something they couldn't fix. "Good night." "Claire?" he said, his voice low. "Good night," she whispered. That night, she lay awake listening to the soft hum of rain. Something inside her had changed. The next morning, Claire promised herself she'd keep distance. She told herself it was just friendship, that she was imagining the tension between them. But every time she saw him, that promise unraveled a little more. One afternoon, he'd waved at her from across the street, his smile tired but warm. She smiled back, pretending it meant nothing. But when she saw Aaron's car pull out of the driveway the next day, a strange ache twisted in her chest. Not jealousy exactly, but longing. She didn't want to feel that way. Yet she couldn't help it. The pull between them was slow, quiet, and dangerous, the kind of thing that didn't need words to exist. A few weeks later, Daniel hosted a small neighborhood barbecue. Claire was nervous to go, but didn't want to seem rude. She wore a soft blue dress and brought a plate of brownies. The evening was full of laughter, music, and the scent of grilled food. Daniel greeted her at the door, his eyes lighting up. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely happy. "Wouldn't miss it." She replied. Inside, Aaron was friendly but distracted, checking her phone every few minutes, stepping away to take calls. Claire chatted with other neighbors, but her eyes found Daniel again and again. Once, while helping him carry dishes into the kitchen, their hands brushed. Neither said a word, but the air shifted. It was a small moment, yet it left her trembling inside. When she left that night, Daniel walked her to the edge of her driveway. "Thanks for coming," he said softly. "Thank you for inviting me." She replied. For a long second, they just stood there, silence heavy with everything they couldn't say. Then she turned and walked away, her heart pounding. That night, she sat by her window again. The street was dark except for the faint glow of Daniel's porch light. She knew it was wrong to feel what she felt. But emotions have their own gravity, pulling you in even when you fight against them. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from Daniel. "Can't sleep. Are you awake?" Her fingers hovered over the screen before she replied. "Yes." Another message came quickly. "I keep thinking about earlier, about the barbecue, about everything." She stared at the words, her heart pounding louder than the rain outside. She typed slowly. "Me too." No more words followed, but they didn't need any. They both knew the line had already blurred. The next morning she tried to act normal. She went for a walk, bought groceries, cleaned the kitchen, all the small things that made life look ordinary. But nothing felt ordinary anymore. Every glance across the street, every wave, every smile carried a secret weight. It wasn't about wanting more. It was about feeling seen, understood, alive again. And yet, somewhere deep inside, Claire knew that stories like this didn't end neatly. They burned quietly, consuming everything in their path. Still, she couldn't stay away. When she saw Daniel that evening, standing by his mailbox, their eyes met. He smiled faintly, a question in his gaze. She didn't speak. She didn't have to, because in that look, that quiet exchange, everything had already been said. For the next few days, Claire tried to keep her distance. She told herself that what happened, or almost happened, didn't mean anything. It was just emotion tangled with loneliness. She kept busy with work, volunteered at the library, and even joined a weekend yoga class. But no matter what she did, her mind always drifted back to Daniel. Every time she walked past her window, she caught glimpses of him, fixing the fence, mowing the lawn, helping Aaron load the car. He looked the same as always, calm and polite. But sometimes, when their eyes met for a brief moment across the street, she could see it, the same hesitation, the same longing he'd tried to hide. One evening, as she was bringing groceries inside, she heard his voice behind her. "Need help with those?" She turned, startled, and there he was, smiling faintly, hands in his pockets. "Oh, it's fine," she said quickly. "Just a few bags." But he stepped forward anyway, taking 2 from her arms. "It's no trouble." Inside, the air felt heavier. They unpacked the groceries together, moving around the small kitchen in silence. Their hands brushed when they reached for the same bag and both froze. Daniel was the first to speak. "Claire, about that night. I shouldn't have come over. I think I crossed a line." She looked at him, her heart thudding. "You didn't. Nothing happened." He gave a short, almost sad smile. "Sometimes it's not what happens. It's what you wish would." The words hung between them. Claire wanted to deny it, to say he was wrong, but she couldn't, because deep down, she knew he was right. He left soon after, thanking her for the lemonade she hadn't even offered. When the door closed behind him, she stood there, staring at the quiet kitchen, realizing that her life had become something she didn't understand anymore. That night, rain returned, the kind of steady drizzle that made the whole neighborhood glow under streetlights. Claire sat by her window again, watching drops slide down the glass. Across the street, Daniel's porch light was on, but the house looked still. Her phone buzzed. "You awake?" It was him. She hesitated before typing back, "Yes." Then came another message. "Can we talk?" She knew she should say no. She knew this was how people got hurt. But instead, she typed, "Okay." Minutes later, there was a soft knock on her door. When she opened it, Daniel stood there, damp from the rain, his expression uncertain. "Sorry," he said quietly. "I just needed to clear my head." She nodded. "Come in." They sat on the couch, silence stretching between them like a tight wire. Finally, he spoke. "I don't know what this is, Claire. I haven't felt anything like this in years. But it's not right." "I know," she whispered. He looked down. "Aaron and we've been more like roommates than a couple for a long time. I thought it would get better, but it never did. I don't want to hurt anyone, especially not you." Claire's voice was soft. "You're not hurting me, Daniel. But this, whatever it is, hurts already because it can't go anywhere." He nodded slowly, staring at the floor. "You're right." They sat in silence again, the sound of rain filling the room. When he finally stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Good night, Claire." "Good night," she said. But as the door closed, both of them knew it wasn't the end. The next few weeks were a storm of mixed emotions. They tried to act normal, friendly, but distant. Yet fate seemed determined to push them together. When Aaron traveled for work again, Daniel asked if Claire could feed his cat for a few days. She agreed, telling herself it was harmless. The first evening she went over, the house felt oddly quiet. She filled the cat's bowl, checked the mail, and turned to leave. But something drew her to the living room. A family photo sat on the shelf. Daniel, Aaron, and their son, smiling under the summer sun. They looked perfect. But Claire could see it now, the distance in Daniel's eyes, even then. She sighed, whispering to herself, "What am I doing?" Just then, the door opened. Daniel had come home early. "Oh, hey," he said, surprised but smiling. "Didn't expect you here yet." "Was just leaving," she said quickly. But he stepped forward, gentle and calm. "It's fine. Stay a minute. I just made coffee." She hesitated, then nodded. They sat together again, cups in hand, pretending everything was normal. But when their fingers brushed as he handed her a mug, something inside her gave way. "Daniel," she began, but couldn't finish. He looked at her, his voice low. "I've tried to stop thinking about you. I can't." She swallowed hard. "We can't do this, I know." Yet neither moved. It wasn't about desire. It was about everything they'd both lost. The laughter, the closeness, the feeling of being truly seen. For years, they'd both lived half-lives pretending to be fine. But sitting there in that quiet house, the truth was impossible to ignore. They didn't touch, didn't cross that line. But the air was full of everything they wanted and couldn't have. When Claire finally stood, tears blurred her vision. "This has to stop," she said softly. Daniel nodded, his jaw tight. "You're right." She walked out without looking back, though every step felt heavier than the last. For days, she avoided him. She changed her walking route, closed her curtains earlier, and kept herself busy with work. She told herself she was fine, but the truth was she missed him. Then one evening, as she was leaving the library, she saw him standing outside, waiting in the rain. "Daniel," she said, startled. "What are you doing here?" He looked exhausted. "I needed to see you. Just to talk." "Daniel, please, I'm not asking for anything," he interrupted. I don't know how to forget you." The sincerity in his voice broke her. She wanted to turn away, to protect what little stability she had left. But when he reached out, just barely touching her hand, she didn't pull back. They stood under the rain, not speaking, just breathing the same air to people caught between right and wrong, love and loneliness. Finally, she whispered, "You should go home. He nodded slowly, stepping back. "Good night, Claire. Good night," she said, watching him walk away through the rain. Weeks passed. The distance between them grew again, but the ache didn't fade. Then one evening she found an envelope slipped under her door. No name, no message, just a note inside that said, "Thank you for seeing me." Her chest tightened. It was his handwriting that night. She looked out her window again. His house was dark, but she could see the faint glow of his study lamp. For the first time, she didn't wave or wait. She simply closed the curtain and whispered, "Goodbye." But life has a way of surprising even those who try their hardest to move on. A few months later, Claire received an invitation, a neighborhood meeting to plan a community garden. She didn't want to go, but decided it was time to face things. When she arrived, she saw him there, standing near the coffee table, looking just as startled to see her. They talked briefly, polite, distant, safe. But when the meeting ended, he walked her to her car. "Claire," he said softly, "I wanted to thank you again for everything. Aaron and we're trying to work things out." She smiled, a little sadly. "I'm glad, Daniel. You deserve to be happy." He hesitated. "You too." Then he turned and walked away. As she drove home, she felt tears slip down her cheeks, not of regret, but of release. For the first time, she knew she could let go, that night. As the street grew quiet and the lights dimmed, Claire sat by her window one last time. Across the street, Daniel's porch light glowed softly, not as a signal this time, but as a goodbye. She whispered to herself, sometimes love isn't meant to last. It's meant to remind us that we're still alive. And with that, she stood, turned off her lamp, and let the darkness settle gently around her. 3 months had passed since Claire last saw Daniel. The seasons had changed, the air was cooler, the leaves turning shades of gold and amber. Her small house looked different now, lighter somehow, as if it had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. She had stopped waiting for messages that wouldn't come, stopped glancing across the street when she heard a car door. Daniel and Aaron still lived there, but they kept to themselves. The porch light that once flickered late into the night now turned off early. It was as if both of them were trying to rebuild quietly, piece by piece. Claire spent her evenings differently now. She painted again, something she hadn't done since college. She filled her living room with small canvases of sunsets, windows, and city lights. She started jogging in the mornings, waving at the mailman, greeting neighbors she used to avoid. Her life wasn't exciting, but it was finally her own. Yet, some nights, when the wind brushed against her windows and the world fell silent, she still thought of him. Not with longing, but with a quiet ache, like a scar that no longer hurts, but never truly disappears. One Saturday morning, she was watering her plants when she saw Aaron standing outside. Aaron gave a small wave, then crossed the street. "Hi, Claire," she said, her tone polite but warm. "Hey, Aaron," Claire replied, forcing a smile. She hadn't spoken to her properly in months. "I just wanted to thank you," Aaron said, "for everything. For helping with the cat, for being a good neighbor. I know things were strange for a while." Claire's heart skipped a beat. "It's okay. I understand." Aaron nodded. "Daniel and I went through a rough patch, but we're in counseling now. It's helping. He's been different lately, softer." "I'm glad to hear that," Claire said sincerely. Aaron smiled. "You know, sometimes people come into your life just to remind you what's missing. Then they leave and you have to fill that space yourself." The words hit Claire deeper than she expected. She realized Aaron wasn't blaming her. She was just acknowledging what everyone already knew without saying. They talked a bit longer about the neighborhood, the weather, the new coffee shop that had opened downtown. When Aaron left, Claire felt something she hadn't felt in months: peace. Later that week, Claire got a new project at work, designing a small art exhibit for the town hall. It was a big deal for her, and for the first time in years, she felt proud of what she was doing. Her days were filled with color, light, and purpose. But life has a way of circling back to unfinished stories. One evening, after a long day of setting up the exhibit, Claire stopped at a small diner for dinner. She was halfway through her coffee when she heard a familiar voice. "Claire." She turned. Daniel stood there, looking surprised but glad. His hair was slightly longer, his face more tired but somehow calmer. "Daniel," she said softly. He smiled awkwardly. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Same," she said, setting her cup down. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." He sat across from her, the silence between them thick but not uncomfortable. "You look good," he said. "Happier." "Doing better," she replied. "Work's been keeping me busy. I'm helping with an art show downtown." "That sounds like you," he said with a small grin. "And you?" she asked gently. He took a breath. "Aaron and I are still working through things. It's not perfect, but we're trying. I think we'll make it." "Glad," she said. And she meant it. He looked at her, studying her expression. "You don't hate me, do you?" She smiled faintly. "No, Daniel, I don't hate you. I think for a while I hated myself for how much I cared. But now I just want us both to be okay." He nodded, looking relieved. "You are good for me, Claire, even if it wasn't forever." Her throat tightened. "You were good for me, too." They sat there for a while longer, talking about small things, books, work, the new neighbors on the corner. When they finally said goodbye, there were no promises, no glances full of regret. Just to people who had once needed each other, now learning to stand on their own. Weeks turned into months again. The town's art exhibit opened, and Claire's work received praise. People came up to her, complimenting the warmth in her paintings, the emotion they carried. What they didn't know was that every brushstroke held a piece of her past. Her favorite piece was one. She almost didn't show a quiet painting of two houses across the street from each other at dusk, one with its porch light glowing faintly. It wasn't about love or loss. It was about distance, understanding, and peace. After the exhibit ended, Claire took that painting home. She hung it above her fireplace, where the light from the window could touch it every morning. A few months later, she was invited to a community event at the park. She went, not expecting much, just an afternoon of music and food stalls. As she walked through the crowd, she spotted Daniel again, this time with Aaron and their son. He saw her too. For a moment, their eyes met. He gave a small nod, not the kind of greeting that asked for a conversation, but one that said, "Thank you for everything." She smiled back, then turned to watch the band playing on the small stage. The wind carried the sound of laughter, the smell of popcorn, the warmth of early summer. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the urge to look back. That night, back home, Claire sat by her window again. The street was quiet, just like before, but everything had changed. She wasn't the same woman who used to wait for someone else's light to flicker on. She had her own now. She thought about all the moments that had brought her here. The rain, the coffee, the silences that spoke more than words ever could. She realized love wasn't always meant to be a lifelong story. Sometimes it was just a chapter one that changed you, taught you, and left you better than before. She whispered softly, as if speaking to the night itself, "Thank you, Daniel." Then she stood, turned off her lamp, and walked away from the window. The moonlight glowed faintly on her paintings, and for the first time in years, she felt complete. Months later, a letter arrived in her mailbox. No return address, just her name written neatly across the front. Inside was a small note that read, "Your painting from the exhibit? I saw it. It was beautiful. You found peace, and so did I. Wishing you everything good." It wasn't signed, but she didn't need to guess. She smiled, folded the note carefully, and tucked it inside her journal. Life moved forward quietly after that. Claire kept painting, kept living, and kept believing that love, even when it ends, leaves something behind, a lesson, a memory, a softer heart. And though the porch light across the street no longer meant what it once did, every time it flickered at dusk, she couldn't help but smile, because it reminded her that once, for a moment in time, she and Daniel had seen each other when the rest of the world wasn't looking, and that was enough.